This week's show brought to you by Will Barton. Seriously, not a sixth man of the year candidate? Welcome back to another Boxscore Geeks show. We decided this week the best thing to do is to compete with the ever topical NBA awards. So the NBA is giving out their awards right now. I know all of you are watching live with bated breath, but maybe you've come to Twitch instead. Anyway, I'm your host, Ray Alvarez, a.k.a. Nerd Numbers, and with me, as always, is my co-host, producer, voice of God, and man of many hats, Brian Foster. Say hey, Brian.
Yeah, what's going on, Dre? We took the week off last week to enjoy the NBA draft, and of course, you were traveling and went to an awesome analytics conference, which we'll talk about too. But we're back 2 weeks later. We're here to talk about the draft, the offseason. A lot of great stuff going on right now in the NBA.
Yeah, so to explain, last week I went to the Great Lakes Analytics Conference. Let me get the full thing up. Actually, because it occurs to me that I see what they did. It's the Great Lakes Analytics Sports Conference. This was a fun thing. It took place in Stevens Point, Wisconsin. The reason I went is that's about an hour away from me. So it was something much more enjoyable to go to than Sloan in terms of travel. It was very affordable. It was $79 for non-student, and I think like cheaper, like $40 for a student. I don't recall off the top of my head. I'm not selling it that well. If you were watching me this Thursday, I was live tweeting it, but it was a fantastic conference. This is going to hurt Brian. It's going to hurt me a little to say. It's not going to hurt, but I'm going to say it, and I think they'll appreciate it. I found the content of the basketball-related material there, because that is obviously the talks I went to. I didn't stay the full time either because I had to get home, and I was up at 5 a.m. with a baby to make it out there. So, by the time 4 p.m. rolled around, I was like, I'm not going to make the closing remarks, and I drove home. But I went to basketball-related talks. The quality of the basketball-related research at the Great Lakes Analytics and Sports Conference in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, was superior by a wide margin in regards to science and math and et cetera than that is normally presented at Sloan. Said it. I'm going to put it out there, Brian. So this is kind of a smaller conference. It's only been going on a couple years. I believe a problem they've had is they put it on next to Summer League a lot. And this year they did not. But there were some fantastic talkers. I'm going to see if I can just get the program up because I want to give some of them their due. I do intend to, I hope, get around to actually writing a full article about it before all of the information leaves my brain. But some of the fun ones, like the best one, Brian, this is absolutely fantastic, and I just want to make sure I get his name right. It is Kyle Allen. So the Pine City, I'm actually curious if you look this up because I do know that he made it to like a local Fox. I think the Wall Street Journal, I think he said did a piece on him. So can you look up Kyle Allen, Pine City Dragons and see what that gets? And I'm gonna shake.
Well, I do have the schedule for the conference up right now, and the name of his talk, it looks like, was Program Purposefulness Using Analytics in High School Basketball. Is that the one we're talking about?
So the Wall Street Journal last year did a talk about him. And so here is what's great about this guy. He makes it so that his team only takes layups and threes. We were talking about this. I tweeted out a shot chart on my Twitter handle, Brian. We called it.
So he's a coach.
He's a coach of a high school basketball team, and this high school basketball team is Morey ball, which is amazing. And what's also amazing, so here's the second follow-up cool part. They're relatively short. He said most of his guys are like 6'1", 6'2" at the top end. So a high school basketball team, not very tall. He says they focus like hell on rebounds. And I actually asked him how, and he said, you're making me give away all my secrets. But then he talked about it, and he said they always have, on offense, 4 people crash the glass and 5 crash the glass if the shooter is in the lane. So because obviously normally what happens is the shooter takes a 3. Everybody crashes the glass. The shooter can get back on D. But if the shooter is taking a layup, everybody crashes the glass. And on defense, everybody crashes the glass, and this team always runs the press. So, I mean, this was just, I was like, holy cow, this is like a dream. For us, it was a dream team. I was like, wow, somebody just doing it. And I know in his talk, I'll see if I can track down his slides or something at some point, but essentially, if you break down year by year, this is the classic high school basketball team. I think that there was an football team that did something similar with like always, never punting, always going forward and forth. Same thing. There was a dramatic turnaround in win-loss records. So
interesting.
And yeah, like I said, this was featured in the Wall Street Journal about a year ago. I'm not going to.
So you're saying he's the real Vivek Ranadive, that he should have been featured in Gladwell instead?
Well, so here's what's going to happen. So for those of you who don't recall, Vivek Ranadive is the owner of the Sacramento Kings. He got his claim to fame by being in a Malcolm Gladwell, I believe, New Yorker article, and then also one of his books. And my cat is really interested in this. So anyway,
your cat loves the Kings.
Cat loves the Kings. Okay.
Oh, look at that cat.
That's going to be on.
We can see him on the video version right now. He's on camera. Her.
Miha means daughter. Anyway, so Vivek got his claim to fame for coaching his daughter's, I believe, high school or middle school basketball team and got them all the way to the state finals. He gets into the NBA and we're like, holy cow, this is a guy that focuses on defense, that focuses on stats, that focuses on the stats that matter, not the flashy ones. And he gets to the Kings, and I wrote an article about this at Boxscore Geeks years ago. And what does he do? He goes full on yay points, and he embraces DeMarcus Cousins and trades away his undervalued assets that put up those scrappy stats that almost got him a state title.
That disastrous trade with Philadelphia, we think is one of the worst trades we've ever seen.
You know, what is always funny to me for front offices, to just take a brief tangent here, is I don't mind trying to make trades that facilitate other trades, but we have seen multiple occasions where a team makes a trade to clear up cap space and gives up a good piece, and then what they wanted to spend the money on is gone. So it's like, yeah, you know, he basically jumped without a net, and then there was no net. And then there's a great Kevin Draper piece about all of the names that they targeted and the ones that just turned them down. And they were horrible names because they were like targeting Monte Ellis and stuff. So this high school coach, amazing. What I anticipate is in a few years, he'll make it to the NBA, and we'll see if he keeps it the same, if he follows the Vivek Ranadive path. But yeah, overall, very good. Like I said, I'll try and get some thoughts up about it. John Drazen was like the keynote talk at the very beginning. It talked a lot about using sports analytics to get people interested in science, like, at the high school and middle school level. So that was great. I gave a talk there, so that's why I got to go. And I'm not going to lie, in regards to basketball talk, I'm the 10th man. I was the Brian Scalabrine, but I got to be the guy yelling at the cloud, and I had to get this off, Brian. It's something we talk about, and it's basically like, why the hell doesn't the NBA care about free throws? And so the stat that they gave in the talk, I think it's recorded. When it's up, we'll show it to you, or maybe I'll vet it first and decide if I look too tired or stuttered too much. But essentially, in 1980, the modern era of NBA, the three-point era, the average NBA team shoots 76.4% from the three-point line, the free throw line, Brian, the free throw line. 76.4% from the free throw line. We fast forward all the way to 2018. Maury Ball's taken over. Everybody's better, bigger, taller, stronger, and the average NBA team shoots 76.7% from the free throw line.
Big improvement. Sort of.
And it's an up year, actually. I was saying I hope this isn't true. The last 2 years have kind of ticked up, so maybe teams are actually catching on. But essentially, this is it was a classic Moneyball thing. And so I feel like my analytics talk in the realms was more like, what the hell are we doing? And I don't want to throw too much shade. Another talk that I enjoyed, but it was a topic that, I actually did in the talk, Brian, talked about the Brian magnitude test. And so
I'm big in Steven's point now, I guess.
Yeah, you are. Well, I said, I'm like, by no means is this your invention, but your point is always, when we're using analytics, how much does it matter? So there are times where there's very simple analytics, and that was my point with free throws. This is a very simple statistic, but it matters a great deal. The way I phrased it is, if you look at an average NBA team, so the average team takes about 22 free throws a game, Brian. Every 1% they improve their free throw efficiency increases their wins by about half a win, their expected wins in a year by half a win. So that's an average team. So if an average team just improves their free throw percentage by 4%, that can improve them 2 wins. And then, of course, taking more free throws, but that's another question. I was focused on efficiency. Another talk that I found very interesting and fascinating, and like the math, but at the same time in the back of my head was just hurting me. The talk was called, let's see, let me get it up. It was Spectral Analysis of NBA Data, and it was from Stephen Devlin. It was a really good talk, but it was essentially using lineup data and using Fourier analysis on secondary statistics to evaluate synergy in the NBA, essentially. And like at one point in the talk, he used the line, when we remove individual contributions, here's how well these players play together. So essentially, if you have Kevin Love and LeBron James on the court together and you remove their individual statistics and look for everything else, how well do they play together? And, I was just kind of gritting my teeth during this talk because I was going, this is fascinating information. This is very complicated. Like I said, it was Fourier math, which is, using like basically time-based methods of like running a filter over data, using play-by-play, fascinating stuff. And I was going, not saying why, because it's an analytics conference. And of course, solving interesting analytics problems is it. But, just going, I know for a fact teams will focus more on that type of analysis than, holy hell, if we just improve our free throws by 2, that's essentially, I think back in the day when Dave Barry was doing some of his very simplistic research for Forbes, I don't want to insult Dave, but what I'm saying is for the Forbes article, like one of our most popular kind of articles we write yearly is the overpaid list. And this is going to get way more crazy because the way you would do it is you take the total payroll of the NBA, you divide it by 1230, that's the total number of available wins. You say that's the value of a win. And you look at the wins produced of each player and say that's how much they're worth. And back in the day, wins were worth like $1.5 million. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's not a bad simplistic metric. So a win's worth $1.5 million. By the way, this is back in the day. Dave Barry was doing this research like in 2011, 2012. The salary cap went up, even before the television deal exploded everything, and now it's huge. The comparison I made in one of our topics that we'll talk, Brian, is Nikola Jokic, who's getting a max deal from the Nuggets. It's $150 million. That seems like a ton. But the way I phrased it is that's essentially the contract they gave Carmelo Anthony back in the day. Carmelo Anthony got, I think like a 5-year, $60 million, $70 million deal back in the day with the Nuggets. And that's just because it's a percentage of the cap. So Jokic is getting paid the same, but just the pot of money is so much bigger. So when Dave Barry was writing his original articles, I'll have to recalculate it, Brian, it was essentially worth like $1.5 million a win. And now, so let me just do a very simple analysis. So the average, the cap per team is 100 million. I know this, we always joke about this not being fun, Brian, but the cap per team.
No, it is. The fact that it's 100 million is so great. It's such a great even number. I'm really happy about that.
That basically gives you 30 times, that's 3 billion, right? So that's 3 billion as kind of your 3 billion divided by your total wins in the NBA. Each win in the NBA using that method is like 2.4 million. And that's just the cap, because don't forget, teams can go over the cap. The Warriors are over the cap. The Cavaliers are over the cap. Lots of teams over the cap.
We have a topic about that on the schedule today.
Oh, cool. So anyway, the point is a win in the NBA is worth like $2.5 million. I'm telling you that every 1% increase in free throw is worth, that means it's essentially worth like $1.2 million using that very rudimentary math. It's like you could invest a couple $100,000 in a good free throw coach and good free throw drills and new science on free throws, but that's very boring as compared to a lot of this other analysis, which is very complicated. And then I argue it's very hard to know, right, the synergy of two players, because the other argument we make about the lineup data, the on-off data, the synergy data is just the sample sizes can end up being so small. If you go to Basketball Reference, they have lineup data for each team, and he even brought this up in this talk, it falls off very quick. So there are times where you're trying to assess how well the synergy of this lineup is, and that lineup only played together 100 possessions. And not only that, you don't know, that those possessions might have all been either garbage time or like, oh my goodness, we're down by 10 and we're just going to have to take threes. There was, I'm going to try, I apologize. This is an interesting one. I'm going to have to make sure to do an article or something, Brian. Another fun one was, it was called the Elam rule. So have you heard about this?
No, is this about Jason Elam, the Denver Broncos kicker?
No.
Or a different Elam?
So here's how it works, though.
I believe he might still have the longest field goal in NFL history, Dre. I'm not sure if that's true, but
I think that isn't played.
He did for a while.
Okay, but so this is a proposed rule change in the NCAA, and there's going to be a tournament going on this summer in a few weeks that I actually want to watch to see how this plays out. So here's how it goes: you wait till, I believe, 4 minutes or 5 minutes left in the game. You take the difference in points between the two teams. You add, I believe, 7 to that score, and the first person to get to that new score wins. So essentially, if I was up by 12, your team is down by 12, I add 7, and basically I say the first team to get to 19, with me being at 12 and you being at 0, wins.
Is that to get rid of overtime, or what's the purpose?
Yeah, and this was, and I actually really want to, I need to email him and ask some questions because, or see the slides, because he was talking about how much performance drops in end of game decisions. If this makes sense. When you're down, teams play sloppy. They just huck up threes. Their points per possession drop. The winning team usually wins because essentially.
So you turn off the clock during this period of time.
Not the shot clock, but yes, the game
clock. Oh, that's so interesting.
It's essentially sudden death with a shot clock on, first person to score. And so this gets interesting because now each, the opposing team, their goal is to maximize efficiency on each shot and try and come back, as opposed to we're running out of time. We have to get as many possessions in as possible and just huck up stuff. And the reason they said the 7 was they basically did like some possession analysis. And it basically, I think, lines up. The average game in this rule takes about 5 minutes. So it is fascinating. He says there are definitely still some weird situations that can come up where it's like it is in your best interest to foul. Because that was another thing, right? If you're up at the end of game time and the opposing team wants to take threes, you just foul them and they have to take 2. And so now they can't score as fast. So there's lots of fun stuff here where it's trying to eliminate garbage time play when a team is down, all that other stuff. And he says it's working well, and there's going to be a tournament that is broadcasting it in the NCAA this year, coming up soon. So I'm fascinated by that.
Yeah, I would watch that for sure. That'd be interesting.
Okay, well, there's some other fun talks that I would love to discuss, but I actually need to collect my thoughts. I haven't jotted down any notes on it, but I will just say that Great Lakes Analytics Conference in sports is just great. It's Great Lakes. There you go. I'm definitely trying.
They're not the mediocre lakes, Trey.
If you're someone who it's like a Sloan situation, I would definitely argue bang for buck. Definitely cheaper. It's going to be cheaper to stay in Wisconsin than Boston. And it's held a little later in the year. We get this flack about winters in the Midwest. Thanks to global warming, though, Brian, they are getting much more temperate. It's very odd. I live in Wisconsin. And the winters the last couple of years have not been as bad as advertised. So I'm going to throw that out there. What I will say easily is it wasn't hard for me to get my talk in. I don't know how the criteria will go up in coming years. So I know, we still talk about analytics and betting. And I will say, there is still not a change for like rigorous peer-reviewed journals for things like economics for subjects like that. I'm not going to try and sell as saying, this just completely replaces it. But I'm just saying in the same realm of Sloan, I found this to be a better conference and definitely more interesting. And as compared to Sloan, much easier to get FaceTime with all of the people that gave their talks, a much quieter venue. Of course, you could just follow the path of Sloan, and in 10 years, it's huge. But I definitely enjoyed that. Let's see. Do we want to talk actual real stuff, Brian? I'll give you dealer's choice. Whatever topic you want to talk. We've got a couple here. We got the draft. We got Kawhi. We got LeBron. We got Jokic.
Yeah, let's just get into the offseason. We'll get the draft at the end. Well, I know you wanted to talk about Kawhi, and Patrick, who hasn't been on the show lately but doing a lot of work on the site, sent us a fairly long email about Kawhi. So do you want to get into that?
Okay, you know what? I actually love it when I just get to read as Patrick, so I'm going to...
go for it.
Patrick's email. Hopefully, we've done this enough times on the show that hopefully Patrick doesn't mind, and of course it was on a show topic, so... I'm not breaching anything. I'm never going to read private emails of your Patrick, but let's read what you said. Okay. This is Patrick, Dragon in character as Patrick. Are we all in agreement that pretty much the only correct move with Kawhi is to do nothing and dare him to leave tens of millions on the table next year as an unrestricted free agent if he wants to leave? I think it's weird how franchises pretend that the star has all the power when in reality the franchise almost always does. I mean, sure, that way they would lose him for nothing, but the fact is that 1 year of MVP caliber play is definitely worth more than any combination of assets you might get him for right now. I'll have notes to say on that, Patrick, in a second. Unless, of course, he's willing to sit out the next year if San Antonio did that. But if he did, then frankly, every team that is considering giving him a max contract should immediately just back away slowly. All right, so we were talking pre-show. There is a lot to unpack. I love Patrick's point. And the metaphor I came up with to what Patrick is saying, and one I agree with, is Martin Shkreli. So for those that don't remember, Martin Shkreli is the pharma bro, as you described it, Brian. He's this person that was at a pharmaceutical company, took a prescription drug, just hiked the price, I think 100x or something like that. And just because of how the stupid rules work, that was a big flaw in Obamacare.
And then he just trolled everyone about it too. He was like happy that he was hurting these people.
Everybody was mad because he was a dick about it. But the reality is he was taking advantage of existing rules to maximize profit for a corporation. For what it's worth, people, that is the country we live in. I'm actually, I'll get on the political soapbox as we're wont to do at least once a week, Brian. One thing that depresses the hell out of me about a lot of the anger about things like companies firing people because they're mad that they said something they're not allowed to, or all this other stuff. If you're a fan of the Republican Party, and in fact, a lot of politicians in general over the last 30 years, they have done things to gut unions, to lower worker rights, to like not increase minimum wage. You've been behind this. So it's like, it really irks me when people just get kind of bugged and go, why the hell do they do this? It's like, you have routinely voted for things that are for this. You know, when you're talking about restricting or not restricting, removing regulation on things like Wall Street, you get crap like this. So it's like, I get really irked when people are like, well, why the hell is this okay? And you're like, well, why the hell did you vote for people that literally have made this their plan all along? Anyway, so, but our point is Shkreli is a dick. It's immoral, but it's within the realm of the rules to do what he's doing. And so let's get back to Kawhi. I agree with Patrick's point. The way the NBA is set up, the only way for Kawhi to get the most money for his contract, that's the supermax, $200 million, whatever, using his bird rights, is either if San Antonio signs him to that contract or willingly trades him away. And they can do exactly what Patrick is saying and go, we're not going to trade you. We refuse. You can walk in the offseason and you're going to leave 1 year of guaranteed money on the table, and I believe 4% a year on the table, which for someone at $200 million, 200 by 5, that's $40 million. That's a guaranteed year of $40 million. We always point this out. There is absolute, I'm repeating the word guarantee, Brian, I apologize, but there is no guarantee of a player staying healthy. They can get injured. And then Derrick Rose is always the example I bring up. He is so fortunate that he got that Derrick Rose contract deal, the max, because he's injured. And while he's gotten more and more tries in the NBA, he has never been worth the same money. So at least he got that guaranteed fifth year. And then, of course, 4% less a year. So, $160 million. That's like $5 million a year on the table. So essentially, they're holding $60 million of his contract in his hand. Now, we get into interesting territory with that, where the NBA putting max contracts on players may have shot themselves in the foot, because it is possible Kawhi can do some cost-benefit analysis and say, me being in Los Angeles for 5 years of my prime will increase my marketability easily to overcome that $60 million. So I'm willing to take that risk. So that's a funny one. So to Patrick's point, I think he's not wrong. The team has a lot of leverage in the situation, and he's also not wrong in that he's saying, we see teams balk at this all the time. The same thing happened with Kevin Love. Kevin Love's like, I don't want to come back. And everyone said, oh, no, we can't lose him for nothing. And they got like the best case scenario, right? Which was 2 number 1 picks that turned out to be not worth it. And I agree with Patrick, where he's saying, you know what? The Spurs have lucked into one of the greatest players in the NBA, and that is always our assertion. If you have a top 10, top 20 player in the NBA, that is a required ingredient to win an NBA title. Without that, there has not been a team that has won an NBA title without that in the last 40 years, basically. And we've had like one example, I call it like the Marcus Camby Super Saiyan principle. The only time we've seen a team kind of go into the playoffs without one of these players and somehow still inexplicably make the finals is in 1999, when Marcus Camby went from being a mediocre player to a star. He literally did his transformation. And of course, there are young players that can do this. Arguably LeBron James in 2007 kind of did this. He went from being a great player to a stud in the offseason, in the playoffs. That can happen. But essentially, you need a top 10 player to win in the NBA to win a title. The Spurs have it. And I think I've had 2 questions in the back of my mind. So if you know Brian or anybody in the comments knows, these are just fun things to think about and something I do intend to research. So if you beat me to the punch, I'm not going to feel bad. One is, has there ever been a trade of a superstar that was still in their prime, that was still productive after the trade? So, Grant Hill doesn't count because he got injured. But, think of trading Shaq or think of trading LeBron, that kind of stuff, where it has worked out for the team that traded the star. One of my favorite examples is Charles Barkley was traded for Jeff Hornacek. Is that right?
That's what I used to say, but I've heard people say Hornacek as well.
I think it is Hornacek according to Basketball Reference, and I've said it wrong. But They essentially they traded like 20 wins of Charles Barkley for 20 wins of players from the Phoenix Suns. But the problem is, I'm going to quote a Jeff Van Gundy quote, usually whoever gets the best player in a trade wins. So you need a star. And there's like, Patrick's right, there's like usually no combination of assets you're going to get for a player like Kawhi that's going to make it worth it. So I think from a game theory perspective, I agree with that take. But from a moral perspective, it feels very say Kawhi doesn't want to play for you, and them going, well, we don't care, and him saying, I want to play for LA, and them saying, we're not going to trade you to LA. The only place we're going to trade you to is the East. And then that gets into interesting territory where you can say, are they leaving better offers on the table just to spite Kawhi? So this gets into a mess really quickly. I'll let you. I said a lot there, Brian, so I know you had some thoughts too.
Yeah, this is a tough one for me. So my first instincts were to not agree with Patrick in that, when I'm thinking about game theory, when you have like 30 different teams involved, you're going to play brinksmanship with your star, to prevent him from going to a couple of other teams maybe. Like, it seems like you're just hurting yourself while everyone else is getting better. But the one argument that Patrick makes that is really persuasive to me is that one extra year of Leonard may be the most valuable part involved for anything at all, right? More than any package of players. Here's the thing, though, we just don't know. There are teams that will, offer packages for him, and they might offer, really good value. We'll have to see. So I think the question is, like, do you want to sit around for a year and let this situation fester? First of all, that extra year of him playing, which we think is really valuable, but then maybe risk him sitting out, risk damaging your reputation with agents and other players. Maybe Kawhi Leonard goes around to all his superstar buddies in the league, is like, look, the luster of the Spurs is gone. This is not a model franchise anymore. Look what they did to me. None of you all want to go there. So, we'll have to see what the trade value is, but I'm suspicious that dragging this out a year is helpful for the Spurs.
So this is the weird situation we're in. If the Spurs can get a year of Kawhi's production, and that's huge, and then also, like, we saw LeBron, right? Arturo has brought up this point many times. It's like his shortened bench theory, which is in the playoffs, teams shorten up their bench rotation. And so it is much more valuable to have a star as one of your 6 players that are going to be, in your normal rotation in the playoffs than to have like 2 good players that are going to be splitting 6th man and 7th man duty. So Kawhi, we know, is one of the greatest players in the NBA, definitely MVP worthy several years. Curry is just a jerk.
And it's easy to forget that because he's sat out for a year, right? Like, it's not fresh in our memory how good he is.
Yeah, and like I said, it's like the MJ point where, Steph Curry's several MVPs, like, locked out. Like, I hope James Harden gets it tonight. I still haven't seen it announced. But, like, there were some ridiculous MVP caliber seasons that Steph Curry's, like, unanimous one shutout. So that is just huge. So you're not wrong. A year of that is such a big deal. And
it's going to be in the media the whole time, right? Like, every week. What's going on with Kawhi?
But I mean, one of the points I always bring up is like Andre Iguodala to the Nuggets. We got 1 year of him. We got a franchise record of wins. We were the favorites against the Golden State Warriors before George Karl got out-coached by falling for, they lost a starter, so I'll leave out one of my starters too. Sorry, Brian. Sorry. That 1 year was valuable. So 1 year of Kawhi is probably worth more than a lot of assets, especially when you think about a team like the Spurs with what they can do. Now, I also agree with the point you made. One of the suggestions I made is, what if the Spurs try and gut the Raptors? Because you could get like Valanciunas, Kyle Lowry. Who was the other one I said? It was Delon Wright. Like Delon Wright.
They have so many good young players on the Raptors.
But I'm saying, think about that. Think if you went to the Raptors and got Lowry, Valanciunas, Delon Wright, and some picks.
Veteran stars and young stars and picks? Yeah. That's
for Kawhi. That would be absolutely sick. So it's kind of like, this is a really hard, there is not a hard and fast rule. And I'll throw this out there, by the way, to get on the political soapbox once more, Brian. We keep seeing lots of situations. So the big story I'm not even call it a big story. Basically, Sarah Sanders was refused service at a restaurant, and it's a big deal. And then, of course, earlier this year, the Supreme Court said it was cool to refuse service to someone because they're gay, and then everybody's yelling. And in all of these cases, and I say this as a computer scientist, the thing that we all try and do is we try and make this, we want to crystallize it into this very hard, fast rule. It is absolutely wrong to refuse service to anybody for any reason, or you can absolutely do whatever you want, the libertarian ideal. And what I'll say about the real world is there is often context and nuance to many situations, which means you have to ask those questions. So there, with Kawhi, to get back to that, I don't know if that held at all, Brian, but whatever. With Kawhi, there's a lot of information we don't know that dictates what the right maneuver for both Kawhi, the Spurs, and the rest of the league is, and we just don't know. So, for instance, if the Spurs get a package too absurd to pass up, of course they go for that. Whereas if Kawhi is going to sit out, what do they do there? Whereas, if Kawhi is not healthy, what do they do there? Whereas if he is healthy and he can play the full season, what do they do there? There's a lot going on that we don't know.
We don't know a lot about his health. That's true. He could be hurt beginning of the next season. Who knows?
Yeah. And all I'll say about this, and we comes back, like, it's one reason, like, I didn't care as much about the draft, even though, as you pointed out, we should plug this. We're gonna work on backfilling this as well. The Boxscore Geeks does now have this year's NCAA numbers, wins produced for the players that play in the NCAA. As Patrick noted, this is not a like mock draft list. This is not who we think you should take first, because as you'll notice, a lot of the top players are all juniors and seniors.
John Conchar, the number one wins produced in the NCAA, he's a junior. He was not in the draft.
Whereas DeAndre Ayton, did I say that right?
You did
not at all. We would probably agree is the best player to pick up in the draft if you're looking at NCAA numbers, because as a freshman, placed top 10, and then if you also start factoring in strength of schedule. Oh yeah, I get to keep throwing out the Great Lakes Analytics Sports Conference, Brian. There was a talk by a guy at Haslametrics. I'm not going to lie, Brian. I kind of want to take his metric system, revamp it a little, wins produced style, and use it for the NBA, because he does it for college. But he does so here's the interesting problem about college sports as opposed to the NBA. In college, people play different levels of competition. So when you're trying to assess how good a team is, you can't what we're doing here, and no offense to Dave, because this is just we've explained this. The wins produced statistic is a descriptive stat on what happened. So we are just saying, based on the games these players played in college and the statistics they put up in this game, here was how much they contributed to their team's success or failure. That being said, a win at I really do not know college schools at all, Brian, but I'm going to guess is Belmont a good school? Maybe
Belmont is a small mid-major school, but they have made the tournament at times.
Okay, but Belmont, small mid-major school, maybe they played some weak competition. So Dylan Windler's wins at that school are different than, say, DeAndre Ayton's wins at Arizona against, I'm sure, much more strong competition. And we've even argued before, by the way. This Shy guy might be pretty good. How do you say his last name? Gilgeous Alexander? Did I get that right? Even close?
Oh, is this the guy from Kentucky?
Yeah.
Yeah. Arturo really liked him.
I mean, he's a freshman. Because here's a point Arturo's made about super teams, and this is true of the NBA as well. There are diminishing returns to good players on a team together because there's only one ball. As an example, Klay Thompson is a player that we say is an average to above average player, depending on what you think of his defense, but he is a fantastic shooter. He shoots 60% true shooting. And we go, if he was on another team and took another 5 shots a game, we'd actually say he was a better player, because his only real skill, only real box score skill, because again, defense. His only real box score skill that stands out is shooting, but he's on a team with Steph Curry and Kevin Durant. And if you're on a team with Steph Curry and Kevin Durant, you're the third option, even if you're a great shooter. So there's diminishing returns on his statistics. And the same happens, to a much bigger degree in college basketball, because Kentucky can recruit, you look at the top 100 list. This is a fun one. I know Basketball Reference has this now, Brian. You look at the top 100 list at Basketball Reference, they have high school ratings. And so Kentucky will get 10 players off the top 100 and 5 off the top 20 usually. So it's absolutely ridiculous. So his numbers might be suppressed because he's sharing the ball with a bunch of other really good high prospects. So yeah, we're not, a Kentucky win is probably worth more than a Belmont win. This was what the Haslam metrics guy was saying is, when he's assessing a team, he's looking at their strength of schedule, their opponents, and he does things like remove garbage time minutes because of stat. So I really enjoyed that. And that definitely gets more fun when we're assessing numbers and stuff. So where are we, Brian?
Well, we're into the draft now. Let's talk about it.
Let's just stick with the draft. Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, I'll loop back to Jokic. I'll just say LeBron. Who knows? It's just fun. But to tie that to Kawhi. That was, by the way, to close off that loop, Brian. The Kawhi point is the NCAA, the draft, Kawhi. It's always weird to talk about it because it's just morally, I feel, yucky about it. I don't like the draft. It's a weird fucking system that is very odd. I don't feel good about Kawhi because no matter how privileged you think it is freaking weird that a player that had no agency in going to the Spurs, had no agency in resigning. The rules said that, right? No contract that Kawhi has signed in the NBA has been his choice. And in fact, that's what happened. He was picked up by Indiana and they immediately traded him to the Spurs. It feels very much like, I don't know if you've ever done this, Brian, if you get a mortgage for a house, and this was what caused a lot of the financial crisis, they basically will sell your mortgage to someone else because the other people think it's, a worthwhile investment, hopefully. And so if you've ever gotten a mortgage, what usually happens is your mortgage gets sold almost immediately. And then sometimes it even happens again. So you're just like, I don't even know who I signed a mortgage with Wells Fargo and now it's owned by some other company. The exact same thing freaking happens with NBA players. So we're sitting here talking about the right move for the Spurs, the right move for other teams, and it just feels yucky. And the same is true of the draft, which is why I didn't get into it. It's like DeAndre Ayton, we're basically saying by his numbers, and can you say his name, the Kentucky guy? Is it Shai? I'm going to see if it's on Basketball Reference, because Basketball Reference does usually include...
I don't know the exact pronunciation, unfortunately.
Well, again, so it is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Okay, cool. And was he drafted? I hope so. I don't know what.
Yeah, he was. He was mid-first round.
11th pick. That seems really good, by the way. That
was a great pick. Yeah, he was really good. So that seems like a good pick.
Yeah, just to our point and what we're saying. So let's go back. So we've got wins produced numbers on the Boxscore Geeks. For what it's worth, if you go to basketballnumbers.com, that's Arturo's site. He has his ratings, which will include things like strength of schedule for the school, age of the player, height, weight, all the other things we think are important.
He ran regressions on all that stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, what I'll always stress this, because I actually think Arturo's model is really good and really sound and a good pick. But what I'll also notice, any draft model that says it's like good, what we should note is that's good at finding above average NBA players. No one has any idea which of these players are going to turn into bona fide stars versus good players. So I get so amused watching the draft with everybody going, "Oh my God, that was such a good pick up there."
Yeah, I've got a little rant about that, Dre.
Let's go for it. Let's hear it.
Well, so this is just like, how should you think about the NBA draft overall? And yeah, what you're saying is the most annoying thing, right? Where you're watching the draft or the pre-draft, hype leading up to it. And it was like, oh, these players, especially the top 10, these guys are stars, they're studs. We should expect everyone in the draft to be a star. So the first thing is, like, it's a crapshoot, right? There's only going to be a couple players in the whole draft, maybe 1 or 0 even in the top 10 that don't become stars. Maybe
top 10 is good. I think Patrick's done this before, and I'd actually like to look up the research, but it tends to look like you get about on average, about 2 stars a draft. And again, they're not immediate stars. This is turns into stars.
Yeah, and some of them are mid or late first round or even second round. So, so those super high picks are kind of overrated. So how should you think about the draft? Just like, like we were saying before, rolling, the Dungeons and Dragons rule. I hate that I keep saying this, but it's like you're rolling the 100-sided dice and it's a very low % chance of succeeding. And if you take, DeAndre Ayton, who had a really good college career, versus someone that wasn't quite as good, you're just lowering your chance by a few percentage points, right? It's not a huge disaster. So that's why when I see all these, I don't want to pick on any specific team or fans, but they just know at this point that their team took the wrong player or the right player, and they're sure that guy's going to succeed. I just totally disagree with that mindset. I'm trying to say biggest. That's the word, right? The largest example, most prominent example for me in this draft was the Hawks Mavericks trade. So
okay, yeah. So I was curious about your take, and actually, it occurs to me. So how do you say it? Is it Doncic or Doncic? It's a Luka, and I'll tell you in just a second.
I heard this like a day or two ago, and I forgot. I think it's just Doncic.
It's Doncic. Yeah, it might be Don or Don, but it's Luka Doncic. Yep.
Okay.
And so here's what happened, just to get the recap. This is a player, was fantastic in EuroLeague, I think was the EuroLeague MVP.
At a very young age.
So let's see. Wow, this is terrible. He is currently 19 years old and 117 days, according to Basketball Reference, and was just an amazing player. I don't remember the team he played for in EuroLeague, but an amazing EuroLeague player, young player. A lot of people were just really high on him. If you're on NBA Twitter, NBA Advanced Analytics Twitter, just like, oh my God, this guy could go number one. He goes number 3 in the draft, and he was traded from the Atlanta Hawks to the Dallas Mavericks for Trae Young, a 2019 first-round pick, and it's top 5 protected.
Yeah, and Trae Young went 5th, so 2 picks after Doncic.
Okay.
And so here's why I use that trade as an illustration. So you're right. Everyone and their mother was all up on Doncic, and I'm not a scout. I have no idea if that's true, but sure. Andrew Sutton loved him. He sent me some numbers, and it was I forget which site, but I was like, I'm not smart enough to read these numbers very well. So, I'll assume his numbers were good, and he was scouted really well, and let's just assume, for the sake of argument, he was the top prospect in the draft. Well, Trae Young had really good numbers in college in the United States.
I'm going to say I'm not seeing him on Patrick's. I'm not seeing him on Patrick's list, or am I crazy?
He's there somewhere. He had good wins produced numbers. Arturo's model really liked him.
Yeah, he's a freshman, 222 wins per 40, and he put up 6.3 wins. So that's not bad. Yeah, he's a top 100 basically.
Yeah, so you've got 2 players that were really good. Similar age, maybe Doncic is younger. And, I just think there's no way you can say that you think Trae Young is basically like half as good, right? Because to throw in an extra first-round pick, that's kind of what you're saying. Maybe that's not the correct math, but you get where I'm going with this, right? To think he's that much more likely to succeed that you throw in an extra pick, I think it's way too big of a crapshoot to know that. That's all.
I think it was fine. I mean, I think what they're doing, and I don't hate this, and so this is a huge point that we bring up a lot that's key. They're basically saying we wanted to take our pick this year and draft this guy, but he wasn't available when we did. So this was the same situation of, say, Dirk Nowitzki back in the day for
Robert Tractor Trailer, rip in peace.
I'm glad you always remember things that I don't. Okay. And they traded a future pick that's top 5 protected, which is fine. What we know for a fact is you can buy your way into the freaking draft. So if they really like this guy and they just wanted to go up, they're basically doing a 1-to-1. And I think that is something that people always forget that bugs me, which is you can't trade these future picks. I think it's actually not a bad philosophy to have, to say, my future pick, who gives a damn about that? I can buy into the draft. I can trade established players for draft picks. So I don't mind this at all. I think it's an interesting 2-4 where I think your take is 2 prospects for 1. We don't know, because our strategy, we actually do say this is shotgun the draft. I also don't think it's not a bad thing to try and basically reach for players that you think are good in the draft. But my bigger take from the draft is always just, this is not where you go to rebuild your team. I hate that model. I hate that model. I hate the process. There was a Joel Embiid interview where someone said pitch the 76ers to LeBron, and he just said trust the process, which is interesting. I think he's not there anymore, so what the heck is the process? He's talking about himself in the third person.
Yep.
Who knows? But I always hate using the draft to retool teams, because even in the best case scenario, we bring up the Oklahoma City Thunder, you give yourself an inadvertent poison pill contract. And we've talked about this before. For those who don't remember, when the NBA CBA changed last time, it turned out this wasn't Daryl Morey's idea. I feel bad about that, because I've always said it was Daryl Morey's brilliance doing this as a shrewd negotiator. Turns out Leslie Alexander, the owner of the Rockets, made him do it. So here's how it goes. If you're a team that's under the cap and you want to offer a restricted free agent a contract that's on a team over the cap, I could say I'll give you $8 million a year over 4 years. I'm allowed to take that as a cap of $8 million, $8 million, $8 million, $8 million. If the team's over the cap, though, I'm allowed to restructure that deal however I want. So I can say you'll get $2 million in year one, $6 million in year two. Let me get this right. $14 million in year three, and like $12 million in year four. And for those that don't know, there's a repeat offender clause in the NBA now. So if you're over the salary cap multiple years in a row, it goes up exponentially. It's like $2 over and then $3 over. I forget the exact numbers. Go look up Larry Kuhn's CBA FAQ. So, you can basically go that method. So you inadvertently get screwed with a player's contract that was completely reasonable, blowing up in your face because of how a rival structured it. If you're trying to retool your starting five through the draft over a couple seasons, they're going to be dirt cheap in the draft. As an example, we're probably going to talk Nikola Jokic in a bit. He's making like under $2 million a season right now because he was a second-round pick. He is going to be making, I think, $150 million over 5 years. So he's going to be making roughly $30 million a season. That is a huge blow-up. So if you do that, if you retool through the draft, then what you end up with is if you're right and you luck out and all these players hit, then at the same time all of their contracts go up and whatever contract standing you were in just gets explodes and you're going to have to find ways to shed everybody else off your contract. Our take for retooling your team is you look for arbitrage opportunities for veterans. There are usually undervalued veterans out there. We keep saying Valanciunas, and that's our point. He is underused by the Toronto Raptors. There are players that are underused by their squad that you can trade for. There are players that aren't getting re-signed. This is an interesting one. I don't know how I feel about this, Brian, because I think he might only be good in Indiana. But Lance Stevenson, Indiana isn't picking him up. He's worth that money if you think he's 80% what he plays in Indiana. So that's the question. So there are undervalued players. If you want to rebuild your squad, you should really use free agency, and then we say use the draft as just kind of like a place where you're taking flyers and you hope they hit. And that, at least the traditional Spurs, that's what they would do. They would look for players in the draft. They would ramp them up slowly. And if they turned to be a great player like Kawhi, they turn them into a star. And if they turned out to be not star players, I just dropped his name. I feel really bad. Really tall guy that they traded, I believe, to the Hawks.
Which team? The Spurs? Yeah. You're talking about Thiago Splitter.
Wow, you were on the ball.
Yeah.
Like Thiago Splitter, like we hope you'll be it. And when he didn't, they flipped him. So it's kind of like that's our take on how you should use the draft is use the draft to take flyers on players. And that's why you're saying you like your shotgun approach is like you want to take as many opportunities. And if you have the Mavericks probably aren't making the playoffs next season. So you're saying they have a number 5 pick this year and probably a top 10 pick next year. You've got 2 picks to see if it turns into something as opposed to 1. But I could go both ways because my other take is if you want to try and not retool, but like take chances on the draft or there's a player you really like that's in the draft, buy him, buy the pick. Again, the same morality stuff we feel weird about. So
they're betting on their scouting.
Yeah. In conclusion, this is an economist argument if ever there was one because we have like on the other hand multiple times.
Well, actually, no, but it's an interesting argument, right? And the argument I think you're making is you can give up some value because you can always still, do arbitrage down the road over and over again in the NBA and make up for it. And there's, something to be said for that. And I'll shout out an NFL podcast I've been listening to recently that I like, Better Rivals. And they talk about this kind of stuff all the time. And they're a 49ers focused podcast. And this is what they say, the 49ers, the players they've been bringing in the last couple of years are all their style of players, right? They have this new coach, Kyle Shanahan, hot young coach. So they're bringing his kind of guys, guys that are good in the passing game, which is where the NFL is going right now, which is great. But they're kind of overpaying for those players a little bit. So it's a tough question, right? Do you want to get the right guys if you have to overpay them? It's not an easy answer. That's why, NBA and NFL gyms are paid the big bucks.
I'm gonna be nice. I'll abstain and be nice.
And they all earn it every penny, right? No, I won't egg you into it.
Dear God. Okay. The only other thing I want to talk actually is the Denver Nuggets. This is a fascinating one. So I believe he's related to Otto Porter. We just said Otto Porter is my. Is that correct? Or I'm not seeing that here, so I could be wrong. Michael Porter Jr., any relationship to Otto Porter?
Oh, I had not heard about that. I don't think they look very similar, but they could be related.
Juniors, so it's unlikely, but apologies. So apologies, probably not related. But Michael Porter Jr. is a player that I believe played 3 games, not that well, got injured with a back injury, and has been out the whole year. And let's see, I think his high school recruiting rate in 2017 was number 2. And actually, I want to see who's behind.
Yeah.
So the only player that was better than him is Marvin Bagley III, who went to Duke. And he was ranked right above DeAndre Ayton. So this is the number 2 high school prospect. Got injured. We didn't really get to see him play. In the 3 games he did play, he didn't play well. The Nuggets picked him with the number 14 pick in the NBA draft. I think I like this. And this actually lets me tie back to what we were just talking about with like the Mavericks. One thing that bugs me about the draft and how people interpret it is they really fall for the sunk cost fallacy, which is one of the first things Patrick wrote about at the site. So for those that don't know, this is an economics term that's really popular. The sunk cost fallacy is if you sink a bunch of money into something, but its value shifts, the money you've sunk in is immaterial to what its new value is. So if I have a car that I paid $20,000 to and then paid $10,000 in repair and gave a $5,000 paint job, and then I go to Kelley Blue Book and Kelley Blue Book says your car is worth $5,000, a lot of people might say, well, I'm not selling my car for $5,000. I put more than that in it, so I'm going to keep driving it, or I'm going to try and get a better offer. Whereas the reality is to say, look, none of what you did in the past matters. What the only value that matters is where you're at now. And the NBA draft is the same way because, right, a lot of teams got these draft picks by losing an entire season, arguably intentionally. And that's what they're thinking. Oh, I wasted an entire season. This draft pick is worth an entire season, right? No, your draft pick is essentially a stock market ticker, right? Your draft pick is worth whatever the maximum value of a player at that point in the draft is worth, or whatever the trade value for said draft pick is at that time. And teams fall for that. So I feel people looking at the Nuggets going, but how can they waste a top 14 pick on this player? But the reality is that pick is really a $5 million over 2-year contract. That's what the number 14 pick is in the NBA draft. And we were just talking about taking a flyer. So I actually kind of love this move. There might have been better players, probably, right? You look at Arturo's draft board or Dave's numbers or some other analyst draft board, there's probably some better. But I don't hate the idea of taking a flyer on a player, that looks great. And, this is a big, we always love bigs. He's a forward. And I think
he's more of a wing, not a big, but I'm not sure.
If this is the way I phrased it too to kind of hurt Nuggets fans, I was like, this is not Marco Bellinelli, Gallinari. This is Danilo. This is us not being able to get over Danilo Gallinari. We need another amazingly talented, tall wing that can shoot from outside that just can't stay healthy. So this is our rebound. But I love that's the thing. Like Nerlens Noel, Joel Embiid, we don't hate gambling on injury as long as you view it as this draft pick is not a player I want to play next season. This is a player I'm hoping will be good. That's like the baseball and hockey are like two of the systems have it right. It's like I can draft a player and put them in the minors and trade them and not expect them to make an immediate impact. The NBA and the NFL are these two weird places where you basically put the weight of the world on their shoulders immediately, and I've never been a fan of that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm of the thoughts that if it's the draft, just take that guy that dominated in college instead of the question mark. So really what they're trying to say is this guy was really good in high school and just never got to play in college. So we're just going to say, we're going to off that old potential, right? I'd rather have the guy that was established in college. But here's another player like that. He didn't get hurt, but Jaylen Brown, one of the top rated guys coming out of high school, played 1 year in college, did not play very well at all, but then came out in the draft and has been great in the NBA. So maybe they're hoping he's going to be the next Jaylen Brown, but it's all a crapshoot. I wish him the best and the Nuggets.
And the one thing I always go to is you can't teach height, right? He's 6'10". Andre Drummond was similar, didn't have great college numbers, but looked good in the draft. Some models like Lane Vastros liked him. It's like I think we were just talking the same thing about excitability with everybody on the draft picks. Like there's so many unknowns. You don't know if he didn't gel with the system well. You don't. They're a young player. You just don't know. So I think that is really the key about all of this in the draft is none of us really know. And the advantage every NBA squad has is there is not a single contract that any team has to shell out in the NBA draft because the most you have to give out, I believe, is $15 million over 2 years. It's like that's the number one pick. And that is nothing. As comparison, the Denver Nuggets, I scream about this on a daily basis, Brian, are Paul Millsap is the third highest paid player in the NBA. They gave him a 3-year, $30 million a year deal. What I get told by people is the third year isn't fully guaranteed, which makes it a little better. That's telling me I have 3 flat tires when I thought I had 4. Such a dumb contract. In one season, Paul Millsap is going to be making double what the absolute pinnacle of the draft is going to get. So you can't really make a mistake in the NBA draft. And if you view it correctly as the sunk cost fallacy and say, I just have to start from right now. This is my team on draft day. Everything that happened last season is done. It's over. It doesn't contribute to how I'll do next season beyond the players on my roster. If in that regard, there's really no such thing as a bad draft pick, especially since all of these players. I've put this point before about like Google hiring practices or any top software firms hiring practices. They're so proud of themselves, right? They have these really hard interview questions. You have to do the on-site, and they only vet the best people. And it's like, well, if you're only picking from like top 10% Stanford graduates, you might be able to just pick randomly, and no matter what you do, you're just going to get some good engineers. And I think the draft is the same way. If you're picking players that were the best high school players that went to the best colleges and that did the best in college, hate to tell you, your sample there is just pretty much tainted, and you're going to find some good players. So,
yeah, I mean, we can go back and forth on who should they have taken and all that, and that's way above my pay grade. I don't really know, but the biggest thing on the draft is just, so they have to do this, right? Every team has to say, oh yeah, this guy we took, we love him. This is a new relationship. It's all going to work great. Everyone's good. I guess for PR reasons they have to do it. But as analysts, let's not fall for that BS. Most of these guys are going to fail, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we always laugh about too, is just how frequently people forget history in NBA sports. Like, yep. Oh my goodness, the Warriors are just going to win because upsets don't happen in the playoffs. And you go, do you remember last year? Or they go, oh my goodness, this player is going to be a star. Stars never get derailed. And you just go, remember Derrick Rose? It's like people don't even remember 5 years ago in sports history. And NBA draft every year is Groundhog's Day. The exact same excitement, the exact same exuberance. And then in 2 months, you're not wrong, Brian. In 2 months, 90% of the players in this draft, everybody like NBA analysts like Charles Barkley and Kenny the Jet will just be like, oh, this player is never going to be any good. What were they thinking? So it's like, yeah, I'll let you get the capper on the NBA draft. I know if you wanted more draft analysis, there's tons of great stuff out there. I apologize that it's just as I guess editor of Boxscore Geeks, that's just never been one of my focuses, which for page views isn't a great thing, but I'm sorry, I've just never been an NBA draft guy.
Yeah, I heard a similar analogy. I think it was Rachel Nichols or someone like that who said, a draft pick is like buying a car. Once you spend that pick and take it off the lot, the value goes way down, right? But so to cap off what I have to say about the draft, I will talk about the Warriors. I'm sure John C. and others are depending on me for that. So the guy they took, Evans, he was a good college player, but he wasn't great. So same thing, right? Like I would have loved to see them even take, his teammate on Cincinnati, Gary Clark, who is one of the top NCAA win producers. He went to Houston as an unrestricted free agent. Surprise, surprise there. Daryl Morey is picking up the great college players, in similar vein of Clint Capella. But so, yeah, this guy Evans, good college player. Everyone's saying he's the Warriors style of player, right? Like he's another 6'7" Klay Thompson who can play good defense and all that. So, I worry they're drinking their own Kool-Aid too much. They just want to keep adding all these wings. But he's their kind of player, so that's an example of that, right? Let's see if it works out.
All right. So, by the way, we stayed up late enough to actually see the NBA awards.
Here we go.
Win MVP. That's good. That's fine. This is interesting. I think I don't have a problem with anybody. So the NBA awards are going on as we're doing this. The major ones. Here's what we got. We got James Harden as MVP, Ben Simmons Rookie of the Year, Rudy Gobert Defensive Player of the Year, Victor Oladipo Most Improved, and Lou Williams Sixth Man. I don't really hate any of those. What I would say is Will Barton definitely deserves Sixth Man over Lou Williams unless he doesn't fit the criteria. I'm going to have to shrug my shoulders and say, good job, NBA, this year.
I agree. Very good picks.
What we would have probably said is LeBron James MVP, Ben Simmons.
How about Dwayne Casey, though?
Oh, yeah. So apologies. Right.
He won Coach of the Year. It's official.
I started laughing. Right.
I would have gone for Quinn Center, Brad Stevens instead. I think those two were better
I
teams. But
so yeah, actually, so I started laughing. I do agree. I think Brad Stevens was the obvious pick. Now,
we have that playoff hindsight, unfortunately, there.
Yeah, but I mean, don't forget they also won. You know, they were second in the conference. You know, losing their star player the first season of the year, losing Kyrie Irving down the stretch. Their rookies played out of their mind. You know, their young players played great. So again, it's another. You're talking playoff hindsight bias. Another thing is, Dwayne Casey did produce the second best team in the NBA this season.
Yeah.
7 SRS is really good.
Probably not the second best roster either.
But
it's a good roster, an underrated one.
So yeah, I mean, who's to say with any of this? It's a funny year to just be able to shrug my shoulders and say I don't have a problem with any of the players. Yeah, you're right. I would say LeBron is my MVP, Ben Simmons is my rookie, Victor Oladipo as most improved is a pretty good one. I would probably do Will Barton as sixth man and Brad Stevens as coach of the year. But I've got literally no complaints. We've talked this before. You know, it's like a Ben Wallace versus Kevin Garnett argument. I'm not going to be mad at either. Or if we want to go more mainstream, Tim Duncan versus Kevin Garnett. It's like if I walk in and someone's arguing that, I'm just going to go, I don't care, and walk out.
I'll point out a couple of things here, Dre. For one, Clint Capella was nominated for most improved player. He just played more minutes this year. He was really, really good last year, so that's kind of ridiculous. Defensive player of the year. So here's the nominees. Rudy Gobert won, very well deserved. Anthony Davis and Joel Embiid, great. Those are all great defensive players. One thing in common with all those three, they're all centers. So yeah, small ball memes continue despite the fact the mainstream awards are going to centers. So I don't know. That's confusing to me.
The NBA is, I started and never finished so many Donovan Mitchell posts. And like I said, part of it was just recognizing that, you know, a lot of the attention I was attracting wasn't the attention I liked, which was like vitriolic Utah Jazz fans, which, by the way, hats off to a lot of the vitriolic Utah Jazz fans. You make Kobe stands look good. But it's just like the fact Utah was looking excited over Donovan Mitchell and missing that the reason they were good was defense. When they were good was when Rudy Gobert was on the court. This idea that there's the depth of the big man just because 2 seasons in a row, or I'd say 3 seasons, right? I'll give you 2015. Was that the year they won their first title, the Warriors?
14-15, yes.
And even then, 2015, they have Andrew Bogut, and in 2016, he gets injured in the finals, and they lose. So it's kind of like, I hate this notion of small ball, and the only real way you get around it, I'll let us talk about it. I'm not even going to talk about the article too much, Brian, but you brought up a Neil Payne article about how like the Warriors were really short, and as a result, that's why they won. And what Patrick both noted is like, it's BS because you're using a Kevin Durant measurement that's either off or outdated. Kevin Durant's over 7 feet.
Yeah, so this Neil Payne article specifically said, look at all these players under 6'10". Kevin Durant's not under 6'10".
And what I'll also say, this has been my point about like sports VU data and stats. Like there has been improvements in the statistics that people can use. So if you're going to go on like on-off statistics and usage statistics, ones that we think are BS, okay, let's be clear. The newer statistics are not BS, but a lot of the advanced metrics people have come up with we don't like. But we're saying if you're going to follow the logic of the usage curve. So our logic on the box score statistics is you get the best players and you win. The box score is a pretty good model for being able to determine who the best player is. There might be stuff outside of the box score that is helpful that can be found in other things, but we're arguing that a majority, the Bryan magnitude test, a majority of the data is going to be held or at least properly encapsulated in the box score. But if you're going to go with the argument that the box score is insufficient, I've heard like Daryl Morey make this point, then why the hell aren't you using advanced stuff? Because we now have sports view data. So for the usage argument, we have time of possession. We have touches per game. I've written articles on this. If you're going to fucking stick with the usage curve argument, then update your stats to use touches and time of possession. Don't use this metric that Dean Oliver came up with to try and approximate. And what we found out looking at the data, which people don't do, what we found out is doesn't approximate what he's trying to approximate well at all. If you find out your model sucks, you update your damn model, and people don't do that. The exact same point with big man. There's a really interesting book called The Sports Gene, one of my favorites, and what he brings up in The Sports Gene is what's important in the NBA is essentially lankiness. We're talking about wingspan. if you think of what you would want as your ideal NBA player, it would probably be Anthony Davis, who has these gigantic long arms and is just really athletic. And he shot 34% from the 3-point line this year, Brian. I mean, Anthony Davis, holy cow! Same thing with Karl Anthony Towns. These players that are just like that. And what irks me about the height argument is, if you look at the wingspans of so many of these players, like Draymond Green is my example, and then back in the day with the Chicago Bulls, Dennis Rodman, they have these gigantic wingspans, and if you really think about it, that's what's huge, right? In fact, it can be an advantage, which is if you are heavy, have a big wingspan and are shorter, you can be quicker and more agile while still being able to get close to the hoop. So when you're writing articles about height in 2018 as an argument for small ball, and you ignore wingspan, which there have been at least a couple studies on that say this is important,
and ignore height itself, apparently.
And that's all I'm saying is that what irks me about 538, to just get back on our throwing shade, when they made like the Carmelo metric, is like I looked at this metric that 538 made, which is Carmelo, which is trying to basically predict the career path of every single player in the NBA, which if you read the book Signal and the Noise, which is Nate Silver's book, you would probably say you would come out of that book and say, man, Carmelo is a really stupid metric if you didn't know it was made by Nate Silver's site. But they used outdated metrics. And so that's and by the way, do you want the secret of this, Brian? The reason they do that, because data collection and like making databases and putting things together can be hard. So a lot of times when you see articles that use per or win shares, or the reason BPM is used so much is because it's on Basketball Reference, and a lot of people don't have their own database of basketball statistics.
I use win shares all the time, Dre, because sometimes I don't have wins produced, and it's like second best.
I agree, and I mean that's part of that's on us for not getting wins produced numbers more easily accessible. But I'm just saying, people fall for this all the time of going, I use this number because it's easy to get, not because it's the right number to use, and that just irks me. This small ball argument is complete BS. If you really looked at wingspan and like every player in the NBA had to hold their arms up high, and you measured that, you would find that like the Warriors are not a small ball team. So anyway, and the same point, there are lots of great centers, and the reason people think small ball is a thing is because a lot of those great centers, Anthony Davis, he's a center. It's a Tim Duncan situation. You can say he's a power forward, but for F's sake, he's a center. Karl Anthony Towns, Anthony Davis. I mean, Clint Capella is just undervalued. Andre Drummond. This season, sadly, DeAndre Jordan, because of what happened with the Clippers. A lot of great centers are just on crappy teams. So they're going, see, it's small ball, instead of going, exactly what we were talking about the draft, Brian. A lot of these players are placed in suboptimal situations they wouldn't willingly put themselves in. And it's foolish to say you can't win with this type of player when the reality is there might be five of that type of player in the NBA. And at any given point, 4 of them might be on teams that won't make the playoffs or aren't contenders.
Yeah, there you go. Do you want to get to this Wojnarowski tweet or just go to shout-outs?
I will just say good job on Jokic getting that max deal.
Yeah.
It's messing that up because they've traditionally done this. They have signed some fantastic bigs to good contracts. Kenneth Reed is an example. I really like Mason Plumlee, back in the day, Costa Koufos. And what they always end up doing is they sign a couple bigs to bad contracts. Paul Millsap, Darrell Arthur, a few others. They play the bad bigs. So I'm really happy Jokic got it. He's one of my favorite players.
Mine too.
He was one of the top 10 players in wins produced last season. And just as an argument, people might bring up his defense as a defense. Maybe, but as I've noted, like, it's so funny for me for people to bring up defense as a detriment to a player, and it's like, well, if he scores that well, he makes up for it, and then they'll ignore offense. Like I'll get on my Donovan Mitchell hate. Donovan Mitchell shoots below average, so it's kind of like if you're going to ignore a player shooting below average on offense, and then a player is really really good on offense, and you go, well, defense. It's kind of like you just have to do Brian Magnitude, and I definitely think even if you think Jokic is a defensive liability, which I'm not sold on, his offense easily outstrips it. Okay, so
and he produces defensive numbers too, like blocks, steals, and rebounds. Okay, let's go forward.
So what's the Woj? I'm actually, as I've mentioned before, I am blocked by Adrian Wojnarowski.
Oh, really? I forgot about that. Okay. So let me read this tweet out. I think I've got my screen shared so you can read along with me if you want. But this came out from him today, midday. Sources: the NBA has raised the available credit line of owners to $325 million. A $75 million increase that could soften the impact of higher team payrolls and luxury tax penalties next season. The Board of Governors unanimously passed the increased debt limit in a vote on Friday. So I don't know much about the debt limit and how it relates to the luxury cap. Do you want to talk about that, Dre, or just let it go and talk about it in future weeks?
Is all this is saying. I mean, Dear God, Brian. I mean, yeah, we were talking about this earlier with Jokic and how his contract, it's really hard to put contracts in perspective because the NBA's salary cap has gone up, and that's tied to basketball-related income. And so the reason Jokic is getting 150 million instead of maybe 60 million, which is what he'd get in the past, is just because you pay a percentage of your salary cap, and that's gone up. And by the way, teams are required to spend 80% of their salary cap. Well, the reason I said, a lockout's coming is we've just seen teams are not good at spending their money, and then they get upset when they find out that, hey, I spent over $100 million. This is a fun one, right, Brian? So if you go to, let's do Basketball Insiders. So if you go to Basketball Insiders and just look up Cleveland Cavaliers salary, this is gorgeous, Brian. This is just so gorgeous. All right.
Yeah, so I know that they are the biggest salary in the NBA by far, right? But so we're going to see how big is it exactly.
So here's the number. The salary cap in 2017-2018 was about $100 million. That's the number to keep in your head. The Cleveland Cavaliers spent $135 million. LeBron James was $33 million. The Cleveland Cavaliers have over the salary cap committed to a non-LeBron team. This is such a train wreck. I mean, Kevin Love is beat up. Like, we love Kevin Love, but he's a beat up player. So who freaking knows what's going to happen with him? George Hill just really underperformed. Tristan Thompson, we love Tristan Thompson, but again, also beat up. We don't know if he's 100% or will be 100% going forward. Dear God, J.R. Smith is horrible. And just they have next year, they have $102 million committed. That's excluding LeBron James.
47-year-old Kyle Korver looks like one of the best deals they have at 7.5 million.
I'm 47 years old. He's 37, Brian.
Oh, 37. Sorry. 10 years is not very much at my age.
I remember this. Kyle Korver took some time off because he had a kid, and I was like, how is he having a kid? He's so old. And then I looked at his age. And I was like, he's a year older than me. So this team has so much committed in cap to non-LeBron, and without LeBron, I mean, we said LeBron James produced 21 wins last season. That team won 50 wins. I doubt they're not able to afford anybody. They're over the salary cap, so they can't afford to replace LeBron with even a replacement level player. So this team is probably not making the playoffs next season. So yeah, to your point,
you're assuming LeBron leaves.
Yes, I am. I in the Brian's bar pool picks, I would put money on that.
That's fair.
So I'm just saying the increased limit is right, but oh my goodness, I'm just saying a lockout's coming. That's all I got from that.
Yeah, I think Brian Windhorst said something like he thinks it's 50% Lakers, 40% Cavaliers, and like 10% other. That's what he thinks now.
Can we just be clear that those numbers are made up? They're bullshit.
He said they were made up. He did not think they were real.
That's what always irks me is when I hate it when people say I have no idea, and then they go, but if I had to put a number on it, 60%, you go, that is meaningless. Now
that's great content in the offseason, Dre. Rumors. That's what ESPN's about.
The easy way you could get them is you could say, I'll tell you what, I'll take I'll give you $100 bet, and you distribute the odds however you want, and that might get you a closer number, but they're still made up. No one knows. All right. Well, I think we got through all of our topics. That was a ton, Brian. You've got a shout out. I like my only shout out will just be to the Great Lakes Analytics Sports Conference. Had a good time. Anybody interested in going next year? I intend on returning. We'll see if I have a subject for next year. You have a shout out, we'll do that, and that'll be our show.
Yeah, I do have a shout out, and that is Summer Games Done Quick. I've shouted them out many times on this show in the past. It started on Sunday, so it's been going for around 48 hours now, and they've already raised over $300,000 for Doctors Without Borders. It's a speed running marathon that'll go a week long on Twitch. So, they're in the Mega Man block right now, and I think they're going to, let's see, I wrote it down here, some other block next. So, check it out. Summer Games Done Quick. Awesome. Fight cancer and other stuff fundraising.
I do like this stuff. I will say the speedrunning community is an amazing.
Sorry, you've done some yourself, Dre.
Well, I don't do like good speed running, and that's like the funny thing because The Legend of Zelda 2 is one of my favorite games. The speed runs for that, a lot of the Zelda games, because of how games are made. Like you make a map and you can use glitches to teleport yourself in various areas, and there are rules about if that's legal or not. So I'm a fan, but I've looked into it. Then of course, like all things, like all communities, they have their own controversies and cheating and everything has sexism because that's the world we live in. Speed running is an interesting thing, but these are fun. I will say, video games for speed running are fun as hell to watch, especially if you grew up on EM. You watch someone speed run a Zelda thing, and you're like, holy cow, what are they doing? I'm watching some Mega Man in the background. This is fun, although
Mega Man X2.
Because we're watching Mega Man at the end of a scene, so we're not watching a speed run, we're watching an animation. But I love that. All right. That's been our show. We'll be back next week, probably still talking NBA. I've been your host, Dre Alvarez. You can find me everywhere as Nerd Numbers. Co-host Brian Foster. You can find on Twitter as Boxscore Brian. You found us not through the website. You can find us at boxscoregeeks.com. We go live every week, twitch.tv. Sorry to do this to you. So here's what happened, Brian. I forgot a shout out. Pokemon Go just introduced trading. And in the Pokemon Go community out where I live, there are people that want to meet up at a bar on Tuesdays to do trades. So that's what happened. We set Tuesday as our showtime, set in stone. And the Pokemon Go introduced trading. And I was like, you know what, Brian, I love this show, but I'm not going to miss out on my chance to complete my Pokedex. So Tuesday, Pokemon Go has trading in it now. So our normal showtime is now going to be tentatively Mondays, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, barring our schedules. You can find that at twitch.tv/nerdnumbers. You can find the audio show on iTunes and Stitcher, the Boxscore Geek Show. Subscribe and upvote. That helps us out. And you can catch, if you want to catch the video show recaps, that's on channel Nerd Numbers on YouTube. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week. And if you didn't get the draft pick you wanted, order a cookie.
All right, we're out. Awesome. That was fun.